all y'all need to push your buttons. Or I'll push them.
No, don't push my buttons at all. None of them.
I can push your button just about any time.
And vice versa.
And vice versa. I was going to say that. You're right.
Well,
We didn't
at
push
least
you all
we're
those-
starting the day all collegial,
Right.
but it's still early.
Here's to a good start.
Okay then.
Clerk will call the roll.
Glenn Whitley, County Judge.
Here.
Roy Charles Brooks, Commissioner Precinct 1.
Present.
Evan Allen, Commissioner Precinct 2.
Here.
Gary Fickus, Commissioner Precinct 3.
Here.
J.D. Johnson, Commissioner Precinct 4.
Here.
Constitutes a quorum.
Thank you. Our invocation today will be delivered by Pastor Cedric Belcher, Senior from Grace Temple, Fort Worth. Thank you so much for coming out today. After the invocation, please remain standing for our pledges. Come on.
Kind of join me as we have our invocation. Let us pray. God of grace, God of mercy, we find our world, yea, our community, similar to when Charles Dickens editorialized about his community by saying it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. In other words, it was a time of polarity, but beyond the dim shadow of polar extremes that threatened the survival of a people, hope was ignited. The same is true as this court convenes to deliberate in a time of polar uncertainty. Guide their thoughts, O God. Remind them to draw wisdom from your inexhaustible reservoir, and assist them to ignite hope within our community by the decisions that will be made today, so that generations unborn can read that in the best of times and in the worst of times, the Commissioner's Court made a difference for all the citizens of Tarrant County. This is my prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you, Pastor.
We have several announcements as it relates to the agenda this morning. First of all, under the county administrator session item 9A4, this is an agreement with the county and downtown Fort Worth initiatives. We're going to ask that we hold that for 1 week. There was an error on the agenda posting, so we want to delay that for 1 week. Also, members of the court, in your red folder this morning, we're going to find you're going to go ahead and find that we have some backup material. You'll see that backup material on all three of the briefing agenda items, and that will be presented to you in a slide as we move forward. Just a couple of other announcements. There will be no court on Tuesday, the 29th of this month. So that means that next Tuesday will be the final court meeting in March. And my mic is on, so we're going to have to replace that. I'll handle this technical stuff real quick for you guys. Okay?
Good job, GK.
Yeah, obviously you've been successful so far. Yes, that seems to be working.
Are we okay to go now? Okay, got it. I'm assuming y'all don't want me to start over, do you?
You're right.
So, just a note to everyone, we've already sent it out to the department heads and elected officials that there will not be any court on the 29th of this month. So that means that next Tuesday, the 22nd, is going to be the last court meeting for the month of March. Also, court, I want to remind you that this coming Thursday, the 17th, we have a special call meeting. This concerns the evaluation of proposals as it relates to some of the issues in the JPS bond program. That is going to be at 1:30 p.m. It will start in the Family Law Center. Also, finally, I believe today, also at 2 o'clock, not the Commissioner's Court, but each of you sitting as members of the Housing Finance Corporation, that you do have a meeting here in the courtroom at 2 o'clock today. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Manion. Court members, you have before you the minutes of our regular meeting of March the 8th.
Move approval.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Commissioner Brooks and Commissioner Allen, I believe y'all have some certificates of appreciation.
Indeed. Go for it, Commissioner.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Brooks. Well, some of you may have been aware that about a month ago, actually I think it was exactly a month ago, that one of our communities in Tarrant County had experienced a grass fire. This was in Kennedale, and it was a 100-acre grass fire. And we had many municipalities that responded and were able to respond and contain the fire. And we had members of our Tarrant County team who played very integral roles in that response. And so Commissioner Brooks and I wanted to be sure to recognize our team members who were part of that response. And I'll add that we are especially thankful that there were no injuries of our team members or people, and our team members were able to save 4 residential homes from being succumbed to the fire. So I'm going to ask, was there more you wanted to ask?
And I will add that Precinct 1 responded at the request of the Commissioner of Precinct 2, and we got out there and did what was necessary to establish a fire break and to save those homes and hopefully save some lives. So we are grateful to the crews of both Precincts 1 and 2 for what they did on that day.
Yes, so I would like to join us at the podium from Precinct 2 would be Billy Redmond and Frank Eason. And then also, hopefully, Randy Renoir is here, because I know he played a huge role in that as well. So please join us, and then Commissioner Brooks, if you'd like to invite your team.
Yes, on my team, we got Joe Trammell, William Redmond, Frank Eason, Doug Kelly,
Gentlemen, keep coming up this way, okay?
have I missed anybody from Precinct 1?
So keep coming up this way. I think they want to get a picture. You guys, big man, we're gonna have to move that for you. One right here.
Joe's not here, where's Doug? Right here. Rick. Come on, Rick.
Boy, you're messing with his podium. Ooh, you gotta have a license to fly that thing. Commissioner Allen, if you don't get up near the front, they ain't gonna see you. True that. Some of these boys are a little big.
Y'all may have to turn a little sideways. I don't know if that's going to help anything, but.
It's gotta flash 3 times. And get that boy in the camera.
Thank you all.
Oh, and I'd like to move to receive and file those.
Second.
We have a motion second to receive and file these certificates of appreciation. Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Commissioner Allen?
Yes, I have a resolution today honoring one of our local seniors in Precinct 2 in Tarrant County, Richard Menifee. So Mr. Richard Menifee is a senior at Mansfield ISD's Timberview High School. And whereas Richard was born with a heart for serving others and has been volunteering in his community since he was 2 years old. And whereas he's completed over 500 community service hours throughout the DFW Metroplex, participated in the Wreaths Across America for Veterans program, marched in Veterans Day, Veterans parades, and more. And whereas Richard and his family participate in the City of Grand Prairie's Keep America Beautiful Adopt a Street program. And in 2020, they received the second place service award for most bags of refuse collected during the COVID-19 worldwide pandemic. And whereas with such a spirit of service, that really is a theme for their family, by the way, Richard was awarded the prestigious Gold Medal Presidential Volunteer Service Award, a national honor bestowed upon individuals whose service positively impacts communities and inspires those around them to act. And whereas in addition to his numerous volunteer activities, Richard still maintained a 3.7 out of 4.0 GPA and has academic endorsements in aerospace engineering, robotics, JROTC, and computer science, and holds a distinguished level of academic achievement. And whereas Richard is a lieutenant colonel in junior ROTC, and upon graduation from college plans to serve his country by enlisting in the U.S. Air Force. And whereas his inspiration has been his parents, Robert and Vandella Menifee, and his brother, William Menifee, who has been a role model for serving the community and an advocate for positive change. Now, therefore, be it resolved that we, the Commissioners Court of Tarrant County, do hereby recognize and express our admiration of Richard Menifee for his commitment to excellence and commend him for his exemplary service to the community, in witness whereof we have hereunto set our hands and caused the seal of Tarrant County to be affixed this 15th day of March 2022. And with that, I move for approval.
Second, proudly.
We have
Yes.
a motion and a second. Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
And so Richard and Mrs. Menifee, if you want to join me down at the podium.
Can everybody get a picture?
I'd just like to thank the Tarrant County Community Commissions Court for everything you do for our community.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you for honoring such a fine young man.
Item C is to receive and file the Adult Education and Literacy Partner Award that we received last week.
Move to receive and file.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Commissioners, do y'all have any other announcements or comments at this time?
Yes, I do have an announcement. A week from tomorrow, I will be hosting a virtual event to start the discussion about the state of women's health here in Tarrant County. Now, I know that it's a broad subject, and for those of us women, we understand that depending on your age and stage in life, you know, who knows what's going on with your health. But I want to invite you all to join me in this discussion about access to and quality of health care for women in Tarrant County. Joining me are an amazing group of experts who either have direct patient care experience or have been involved in research and advocacy in women's health issues, including Dr. Karen Duncan, the president and CEO of JPS Health Network, Dr. Marcella Nava. She's a UTA associate professor with the School of Social Work. Dr. Jasmine Tiro, she's a professor and researcher with UT Southwestern. Dr. Sarah Shelton Spain, she is a chief of psychology with the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs. Dr. Giovanna Merriman, who is the associate director of our Tarrant County Public Health Department, and Amanda Arizola, who serves as one of the Precinct 2 appointees to the JPS Board of Managers. So it will be next Wednesday, March 23rd at 11 a.m. via Zoom. We are asking folks to register, and we look forward to you all participating in this important discussion with us. And I will have a very exciting announcement to share during that time at the conclusion of that event as well. That's all I have.
You're going to hold us in anticipation.
Yes.
Any other announcements at this time? I want to make one comment, and I saw Hyder. Where's Hyder? There he is, back over there. We just completed an election, and as with every election, after that, the Secretary of State submits to our election administrator certain mandatory requirements that we go back and hand count to determine the accuracy of the machines and the counts that we have. That is done on election day for, in this particular instance, 4 particular locations. And then in early voting and in our absentee voting, they take certain precincts and they pull the ballots from all over the county where those precincts voted, where those individuals from that precinct voted, and they go back and they manually count and compare that then to the total that was reported via our equipment. And again, and that's done by the Secretary of State. They give us those precincts, those locations, and the races. And I'm proud to announce that ours was a perfect match. And so not only was it a perfect match this time, it was also a perfect match as it was in 2020. Those counts are poll watchers, party chairs are invited to be a part of that and to observe that count. I know that we have heard some concerns about the integrity, and I will just tell you that that is our #1 priority of Hyder and his folks, of the party chairs, of the parties. And just to be sure, one of the things that we have talked about doing and will do sometime in April is we're going to ask folks if they've got questions about how this equipment, how all this works, we want them to submit those to us, and we're going to hold a workshop sometime in the month of April where we will address those concerns and those issues because we don't take it lightly. Our election process in this country and in this state and in this county is extremely important, and it is important that everyone have confidence in that. And so we're going to respond to questions, and we're going to go forward and try to answer the questions as we do that. Again, integrity is always our top priority, And as I said, I want to congratulate Hyder and his folks and the parties, because now in 22, as is in 20, we had a perfect match when we went back and recounted manually those paper ballots and compared those with the results that were reported via the machines. So congratulations, thank you. Thank your people for all of the hard work that they put into the process as we went forward, and we'll look forward to that workshop as we go forward. So with that, we will move on to the consent agenda.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. I'm going to go a little out of order, and at this time we have two people who have indicated they would like to participate in our audience of participation. Y'all are more than welcome to stay for the entire meeting, but I'm going to just use a little discretion at this point in time and call you forward. The first is Amy Hale, I believe. You can pull that thing down. There you go.
Thank you for letting me speak today.
Speak up a little bit if you can.
Can you hear me?
That's better, yes.
Okay. Thank you for letting me speak today.
Wait a minute, we don't have them, that mic is not working.
Hang on just a second.
We'll get our technical support here to come forward. Nope.
It is, it's working, we just need to turn up the volume a little bit in the back.
Can you hear me?
If you just speak up a little bit, that would be good.
Can you hear me?
That's better. Speak up, turn the volume up more if you can.
Tell you what, let's do this. You can have. Hang on a second. Put that one
Thank you, sir. All right, can you hear me?
That's
Much better.
Thank you for letting me speak today. I wanted to update you on my case. At my hearing, they refused to address concerns from my last visit with my daughter and her having molluscum contagiosum. Even the concerns coming from my supervisor on my visitations, who is someone who has a lot of experience in child abuse in cases like mine. My supervisor said that this is very concerning due to the nature of this case, and that my supervisor did notify the court before the hearing. However, the concerns were not allowed to be addressed in the court that day, and the court did not allow evidence to be heard or to be submitted into evidence at the hearing, and I was not given enough time for the witnesses to be heard. My case is still buried. My daughter is still with her abuser. And the forensic examiner could not submit her reports that were subpoenaed, ducis tectum, into evidence, nor was she able to testify to those issues that she has testified to before. This hearing has failed my daughter. You sent me to talk to the DA and some other individual last time I was here, but I have not heard back. And someone from the DA did show up at my hearing to let the court know that I had spoke here before, but no reach out to me personally. And I still don't know where the proper venue is to forum to take my pleas for help. I've reached out all over the place. I know others have too, other parents. You've seen some of the other parents. I want to ask for guidance and help for my daughter and the other children and families, Brad Lamb and Andrew Van Way, and there are others I know there are other families, at least probably close to 10 that I know of, and I imagine there's more suffering similar situations in Tarrant County. And if it's not too much to ask, is it possible to be put on the agenda that we could discuss these issues, to have the time to address these issues here at the Commissioner's Court? And if not, where would be a good place to go? Where do we go? God's will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Thank you for your time today and any help and guidance you may be able to give.
Amy, thank you for being here today. I will get with the administrator and see what we can do to move forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. The next person is Mike Brewster.
Good morning. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity. I actually have a lot on the plate today, just like many of you do. And, just bringing the perspective sometimes the problems that we all deal with can be kind of minor compared to others. But at any rate, I come before y'all a lot, and in many cases it's because I see potentials for problems. And I would like for my community, my government to not be wrapped up in those. I saw, for instance, that there were going to be issues with the document retention when we did the update a while back, and I tried to get y'all engaged with that. Wasn't successful, and that wound up in court. And I don't want my county to be in court. It's my money that's being spent there. Now, I'm not the only one that's involved in election integrity issues and transparency issues across the county or across the state. And increasingly, we're running into situations. I got into situations from another county yesterday that actually was referencing legal work that came from here, from Tarrant County. Transparency is a very, very big part of this. If you want trust from the community in the election process, being able to see the documents that are available is a very important part of that. And the law is actually pretty specific on it. For some reason, there is another attitude that, no, you can't have that on a lot of these cases. And I'm seeing things a bit differently than that. The situation I got into yesterday, I saw where it was beginning to be a contentious thing, and people are going to start spending money in court. I don't want the citizens to have to do that. I don't want the counties to have to do that. So I will be making more document requests from the county on stuff, and I think I've got the legal right to do that. One of the things that I'm letting y'all know today is that I'm going to contact some people with Ms. Wilson's department. And just like I've sat down with Mr. Garcia, we try to do things on a very respectful and forthright basis. I'm going to sit down with some of her lawyers and go through some of these issues and see if we can iron them out and come to a consensus agreement, just fellow citizens working in the same county to get some things done and to try and keep things from becoming contentious. But I do want to iterate that as the future goes on, and there are many of the issues that we'll discuss in the coming workshop, that document releases and transparency are going to be a very, very big part of building that trust with the public, and it's going to be the biggest part of my thrust in the next couple of weeks. So just to let you all know that's happening. Ms. Wilson, if I can contact some of your people today, I'd appreciate it. And thank you for your time and consideration.
Please get the list of questions to Mr. Manius or send them in to us.
Yes, I've already provided several, and I may amend and send a few more. But some of this is an ongoing concern to make sure that things are available, and not just to me. I want everybody to be able to see it. And I think Mr. Garcia will tell you, I'm an operations manager. That's what I do. I don't want to impact his operation. But to get those documents to the public as uniformly and with as little impact on his department as we possibly can. But I'm going to want a lot of stuff, just to be frank about it. And I think I'm supported. But that's what I'm working on. I try to be open and upfront with y'all, very honest, and try to be respectful, and I hope we're able to maintain that. So thank you very much for your time, and I really appreciate the consideration this morning.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Mr. Brewster and I spoke earlier also on these issues, so we're handling that part of this. So members, report now that we're at some action items. We're going to go ahead and ask Mr. Chinesian to come forward at this time and do his presentation concerning health-related issues for Tarrant County.
Good morning. Good morning, Your Honor, members of the court.
Morning.
Back again with my record-breaking one-slide presentation. So good news continues. We're still at moderate level, but as you can see on the chart top left and the bottom right, they're all in a declining trend. So positivity rate is very low. I think it's 2% and some change. Case rate is like 29 per 100,000. Very, very low COVID situation in Tarrant County. We're still continuing to add a few cases. You know, the numbers that are posted are a couple hundred a day, but when you look at all the data, the new cases are really about 100 a day, in that range, and it's starting to decline even further. The key in this chart here is the big red arrow. I wanted to point that out. I did that last week. We're having a late season surge in the flu. That's influenza-like illness, the blue line. It's at about 9%. That's the highest this season. And also on our positivity rate for flu tests, we're at 19% based on recent data. So now that there's a striking comparison, 19% positivity on flu, 2.5% on COVID. So if anybody's got respiratory symptoms, get tested for both. You're likely to have flu, not COVID. Even though COVID is still there in the community, we're still worried about it. And to keep us worried, there are things overseas that are percolating at this point. There are huge surges going on in several countries. UK again went on alert because of all the stuff that's happening. China's got a Omicron 2, the stealth variant surge happening. They locked down a big city called Shenzhen. That's where a lot of our supplies come from. So if inflation wasn't a problem, it is going to be now. And then, of course, New Zealand, which had kind of survived without much of a major issue, has a huge surge going on with the COVID currently. Just like what we saw in January, the epi curve is sort of straight up in New Zealand. Several other countries overseas are seeing similar outbreaks, some in Europe, some in the Middle East. So the point of all of this is we're keeping an eye out, but like we've talked the last couple of times, it feels real nice that we're in a decline and everybody wants to take their guard off. But maybe, just be a little bit cautious because this thing could come back around. We're keeping our fingers crossed that, we're done with it, but who knows? So that's all I have, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Just keep an eye on what's going on internationally.
Yes, sir.
People travel and diseases travel.
They do.
So I think one other thing that we'd like to report on is that vaccinations for the flu.
Yes, sir.
You want to talk just...
Thank you. I looked at you. I was like, is he going to ask? So we are in the process of gathering data. We still have our agreement with the pharmacies to provide free flu vaccine for the uninsured. And the reason we bring this up is, even though it's late in the season, we're seeing a huge surge. So if anybody out there who's not taken their flu vaccine, and part of the reason is they're uninsured, you can go to Kroger Pharmacy. You can go to, I think, Tom Thumb's Pharmacy. There's a participating locations listed on our website, and they will offer that vaccine for free for the uninsured. We have that agreement good till the end of March, and we're gathering data to see how much utilization there has been this year. So I'll be trying to report that back hopefully early April. That's all I have at this point.
Any other questions for Vinnie?
Thank you, Vinny.
Thanks, Vinnie.
Mr. Carter, we can go to the administrator section. On item number 1, we're requesting that the court review and reports that have been submitted as relates to COVID-19. This is the weekly update that our office provides to the court and to the public. We ask that you receive and file this report at this time.
Move to receive and file.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Member of the Court, we can now go to item number 2. This concerns discussion and possible action regarding the ARPA funding. This is a continual thing that we have on the agenda. There are 2 areas that we cover. One is to report to you if there is any changes in the budget, which was recommended on that we recommend on March 15th. There are none, so there's no need to take any type of action on that particular one. The second one concerns any activity that we have or item on the agenda today that involves funding by FRF. We do have one on there. It's the IEM contract that you're going to see under purchasing. We ask that you receive and file this report.
Move to receive and file.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
So, and then finally, on item number 3, this concerns the county's financial matters, which includes the issuance of debt and certain other items. This was something that we talked about last week. Commissioner Fickus, you had asked that we addressed 3 particular issues, and that one of those issues was a proposal or comments and recommendations concerning refunding of certain debt that has already been issued. The second one was the $100 million plus proposal of selling debt, which staff has had recommended to the court. The direction from the court at that time was that you wanted to see if there was a means or ability to actually go out and sell more than $100 million worth of debt. I will remind you that that debt is something that has been approved by the voters, and it deals with our transportation bond program. And then third, we ask that Hilltop, who is our current FA, that they bring us a partnering proposal with another FA firm, and I believe that they are here to speak on all 3 of those particular issues. So rather than me standing up here, Ms. Alexander from Hilltop is here to address the court. We do have a slide presentation, and look for your discussion and direction on these particular issues.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you. I'm Laura Alexander with Hilltop Securities, and on behalf of our co-financial advisor, Estrada Hinojosa, I'm just going to lead a brief discussion on bond financing and try to hit on all the points that GK just mentioned. I just want to introduce Tanya and US, my colleagues here in the front row also. So quickly, just set the stage as a reminder. I know you guys don't live and breathe debt every day. This is just a quick chart of your annual debt service. And you'll see your payments in the blue. Annual payments over time are declining. Right now, all your debt pays off in 2035, which is pretty short relative to most governmental entities. A lot of folks have debt out for 20 or 30 years. And also, you'll see that you're paying off $27.5 million in July. That first principal payment there. Another slice at how your debt looks right now. All the debt on the previous page is really made up of these 6 bond issues there. So you see going in sort of descending chronological order. The debt that you have outstanding, the totaling $213 million, the actual interest rates that you're paying on those bonds. And I just want to point out that those are the rates the investors receive, but not necessarily indicative of your borrowing cost. So if you're a bondholder, you might have a bond that has a 5% coupon, but that bond was likely sold at a premium. And so the borrowing cost to you effectively is lower. So your borrowing cost on a blended rate is closer to 2.6% on all of this debt, even though you see some 5% coupon bonds. And essentially investors pay a premium to get that higher return. So they pay it up front and then you pay it back over time. It's kind of how that works. You have 2 bonds that have call dates coming up, and those call dates allow you to, essentially, when you get to the call date, you could call in all the remaining principal and all the interest would be forgiven on that date, after that date. That's how that works. And so those become good refinancing candidates for savings. So unlike your mortgage, your mortgage can be refinanced anytime and for as many times as you want. On a bond issue like this that's tax exempt, you really only are going to have savings when you get close to those call dates. And if it's too far out, and we'll talk about that, it's a little bit subjective. It's a function of the rates you're borrowing today at the length until that call date can be realized, because you're going to owe interest until that date. And also the actual rates you can invest in on the escrow. So it's a little bit more complicated than just, like I said, how you think about refinancing your mortgage.
So if we call them early, then it becomes taxable?
So yeah, a few years ago, the IRS limited issuers like the county to being able to refund debt more than 90 days out. It has to be done on a taxable basis. It used to be, I think the last time we did a refunding for you, it was still under the old rules, and we could do it on a tax exempt basis when you're more than 90 days out from that call date. If you're within 90 days, you can still do tax exempt rates to refinance tax exempt debt.
So again, to be sure I'm clear, we decide we've got a lower interest rate, we're gonna call these bonds, and as a result of calling them, we have to pay them all off. And unless we use reserves to pay them all off, then we're borrowing more debt. And the people who are buying those bonds, instead of them being a tax exempt bond, they're gonna be a taxable bond.
Correct.
Okay.
So I have a quick question on that. So just for clarity, if we do call these bonds, and let's say we'll take the 2013 or 2023 bond that is callable. It has a 5% coupon on that, so that whenever if we decide to go ahead and refund that at this time, it is my understanding that we would not only have to refinance the principal amount, but also that amount of interest that we would have paid on that until the recall date.
Right, until 2023, correct.
So it would be the principal plus the interest that we would pay, which would be 5%. Is that correct?
That's correct. And that's the heart of why refinancings don't always intuitively make sense in our world, my world, I should say. You think, oh, I've got 5% bond, I should just go pay it, I should just be able to refinance it. But that call date is key, because like GK said, you're going to owe the interest until that call date. And you could go borrow at a low rate today, but you're going to have to borrow enough to pay that 5% interest until that call date. So you're having to put enough to pay the principal off and the interest until the call date, which makes it, again, a little bit of a drag on the refinancing.
Given all that you've said, we can do that, both those things, and still come out ahead.
You can, and this slide speaks to that. You can, and I'm not suggesting that you should. So just to be clear, so this is a summary of based on taxable rates.
Do I have that page in here someplace?
There's 12 on there, but I think it's number
Should
3
be.
in the packet.
Should be part of your slide deck, and it should be on page 3 of this slide deck.
Yeah, it wasn't in the earlier version yesterday, but it was in a
Okay,
later
so it's in
version.
a big
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
slide deck.
Yeah, in the red folder.
So drilling down on those refinancings again, this carries over some of the same information from the previous page, but what I want to call your attention to is the gross savings column. So on the 2013s, if you were to refinance them under current market conditions over the life of those bonds, so between now and 2033, you could save approximately $2.8 million. Again, spread out over a number of years. And the borrowing cost on that new issue, it's a taxable rate, is about 2.65% under the current market. The negative arbitrage column is what I'm calling an opportunity lost, so to speak. So by doing it today, you're leaving approximately $450,000 on the table if interest rates were to stay the same and you waited to do it next summer when it was currently callable. So if you waited till 2023, and you call them, you didn't have to pre-fund all that interest, essentially is what I'm talking about. That's sort of, like I said, savings that's not being realized. And I'm not saying that rates will be the same a year from now. I'm just saying that's how the math works.
Well, I guess the question I would ask on that is the Fed has said, or at least indicated, they're going to raise the rate by a quarter of a point every month.
Right, tomorrow, right.
Yeah, tomorrow being the second or third time that they've done, it'll be the second time, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So, I would be looking and saying, okay, if we don't do it,
Right.
then what is each quarter of a point? What effect does each quarter of a point have on the assumptions you're making here?
Yeah, so the quarter of a point is a good, it's important, but that's a short-term rate. Essentially that's going to impact 30-day rates. It may impact 10-year rates and 5-year rates, but it's not clear.
Well, they've done it once. What effect did that one time have on it?
Some of the interest rate movement longer term is baked in, but to be honest, all of that is lost right now because of the invasion in Ukraine has created so much outside volatility. It's really hard to know where the market is. Rates are up 20 to 30 basis points since March 3rd, across the board, whether taxable or tax exempt. Last week the tax exempt market was up over 20 all by itself. So, there's a lot of noise out there right now, which makes it a little hard to predict. And I agree with you that on the 2013s, these probably do make sense to do soon. And I think with your plan of finance, whatever you decide to do this year, those probably make sense. The 2015s, I think would be better off to wait on. And again, it's a flexibility thing. You can revisit it and decide to refinance them next year or the year after, right? The 2015s, that call date is not until 2025. And it provides you with a lot of flexibility to manage the tax rate and reduce that opportunity loss. So here you have like $1.1 million of opportunity lost if you did the refunding today that could convert to savings essentially, again, if all things stay the same. Remember, you've got the benefit of if you wait, and I'm not saying you have to wait till it becomes a tax-exempt refinancing, but you have that benefit.
It becomes a tax-exempt when we wait till the call date.
Until 90 days before the call date. Mm-hmm. So the main message is it's complicated, like how to use your one refunding, because once you've done it, that call date's going to be pushed out or not exist at all, and you're not going to get another bite at it. And given that you're rolling out a $400 million plan of finance, I think the 2015s help you be able to manage that and maybe accelerate that if you wait and use it in a more prudent fashion as you learn what your values are over the next year or two. So that's the 2015s right now I'm recommending you hold on. Again, we might decide to refund them next year. We might decide to refund them the year after. In the 2013s, I think you should include now. Just that's where I stand on that. Any other questions on that? I know it's complicated. All right, so besides the refinancing, just other factors influencing debt capacity. I know we talked about this briefly in June when we were talking about bond election amounts. The structure of your debt, we talked about property value growth assumptions, which is what we're about to talk about and probably the biggest driver in your affordability. That debt service tax rate that you're holding the same, obviously the interest rates at which they're sold, and then the term of the debt. And in the past, the county's always sold 20-year debt for new projects. And that was how we approached the bond election, kind of going into that. We are running some alternatives to that, just so you can see the impact of that. And certainly with rates being so low, and they're still in the 2% range, that's a very low borrowing cost. Those of you who remember back, in the 80s and 90s, even early 2000s, we never thought we'd be borrowing 20-year debt at 2%. So there's something to be said for potentially going out a little longer if you think rates are going to be higher in the future.
So we're not locked into 20 years?
No.
We can go to 25?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to take us back for just a second because we're moving into a different area at this point, and I want to move into that area. But I want to come back to the refinancing for just a moment.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you've seen the projections that we had been given that indicated about a $5 million, almost a $6 million savings as a result of refinancing both the 13 and the 15. And after looking at that, you still are, I mean, I don't see those numbers anywhere near that on your sheets.
Right, because the market has moved so much. And some of those measurements were at the lowest rates have been in the last 3 months when that analysis was done. And the market doesn't stay there very long. So the treasury market is what really drives the taxable interest rates that you'd be borrowing at. And that, like I said, that volatility has been significant. And like I said, the 10-year treasury rate, which is probably a good proxy, is up, like I said, over 25 basis points since March 3rd. So the window of when that sort of $5 million might have been realized was very, very brief. And I would say, like I said, there's still a significant amount of negative arbitrage and reasons I think you should not do the 2015s. Even if we could have timed it just right, I probably would have told you to still hold on to the 2015s for the future.
So if I'm gonna go back to page 3 for just a second, Ryan, and then I'm gonna be ready to move on.
Sure.
When you say the present value savings column, that's 4.6. Would that have been, is that comparable to the 5.9?
I'm not sure if it was gross savings or present value savings or that 5.9. It might have been.
I think it was present value. And then the net, okay, and then the net arbitrage, but that would also be included in the present value savings.
The negative arbitrage is savings that's not being realized.
Okay, but we would still, the present value savings.
It would capture that. The present value savings is a present value savings. That's just the gross cash flow discounted back to today's dollars.
Okay. And you believe when you're saying, and that's under a calculation that you're doing as of what date?
May 17th.
5/17?
Yeah, May 17th is the.
That's what you think we could do it. If we did that, we would save 4.6.
Well, that was based on the rates as of Friday.
Okay.
And like I said,
we
it's
don't
always
know
a
what-
moment, it's a moment in time. Without any cushion, this is raw rates as of last Friday.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we're through with that. So let's move. Now let's talk about the issuing of debt on a go-forward basis, given assumptions. And I think as we go through this, the assumptions are what we need to feel comfortable with. Or if we want them to change them, that's where we need to say, let's change them.
Right, yeah, so this is really where the discussion comes in more. I mean, obviously happy to answer more questions along the way, but wanted to remind you kind of what your historical growth assumptions have been for the taxable values as we move forward, because really we're going to be talking about what are you comfortable with for future assumptions. And also want to point out, in the past, it's been a while since we've actually sold bonds for new projects because you haven't had a bond election in a while. But we used to sell new project debt in August generally, and either close in late August or close in September. And the reason for that was really we were working off the county's schedule. It wasn't my schedule, but certified values, come out at the end of July. And I think with that information, it was part of the budget process. We'd sell the new debt, it would get rolled into the tax rate, and you had that rate certainty. Again, you knew exactly what you could afford because you knew what your certified values were. Certainly we could sell before that, and if we want to be, try to move faster, but we're going to have to guess, I guess, at what those values might be and able to try to target a specific tax rate to hold the debt tax rate the same. And we have some strategies on that, but I just wanted to, just like, why hasn't this conversation come up before? It's really because in years past, it was the timing of when we sold debt that made us not have to guess at what the taxable value growth might be.
And let me ask Wendy, when do our little blue love notes go out?
April.
Middle of, first of, last of?
I'll find out for you.
Thank you.
And you usually get preliminary value or some
That's the
decent
blue love
estimate,
notes.
right? Yeah, I think about it in May, but maybe that's what you're
I
referring to.
think you have to protest them by the end of May.
Okay.
But normally I recall them coming out sometime in April. It's kind of like death and taxes and property tax notices.
Right. So having that information obviously would be helpful to try to guide this discussion, but absent that right now, I'm just going to use some assumptions. So as we look at what you can afford, and how we modeled this, I want to hit on a few things. We're holding the current debt service tax rate as it is the same as this year. We're looking at funding at least $100 million. And that requires, like I said, counting on growth in 2023 and 2024 in my model. If you have no growth in 2024, so fiscal 2024 again, you cannot afford $100 million.
So again, what we're talking about now is if we approve a tax rate in this September, that will be the 2023 value.
Yes.
You're saying. And when you say fiscal year, again, you're saying October 1st through September 30th. Now,
So absent.
I hear what you're saying, and we'd have to have no growth in 2024, and that hadn't happened.
No, and I'm not suggesting we will.
extremely
I'm just saying we're
unlikely.
counting on some growth in 2024 to get to 100 million. If I don't count on any growth in 2024, you're limited to, depending on the term, roughly $80 to $85 million is what you could afford. So just,
Yeah, but we-
And this
we
is,
have
this is
never-
one of
we
our
have
first
never-
questions, is what kind of a growth rate do we want to assume for 23, 24? And
Right.
I don't think we need to go out much past 24 is what you're saying.
right, for right now, I don't need to know beyond that. It's,
And
'cause-
last year, our growth rate was 6.7?
That's correct.
Okay.
And I talked about refinancing. I jumped down. The 2013s, we are looking at structuring them, and I'll show you what it looks like, where we're accelerating the savings. So you can move principal around a little bit. It doesn't have to be what I would call uniform savings every year. So we're targeting the savings in 23, 24, and 25 to help you accelerate more new bonds into those years. So create capacity by moving the savings into those years and making the outer years of those bond issues, basically their payments the same as they are today. So we're not extending debt, we're not making the term longer, we're not making the payments higher on the back end. We're just saying, any savings I can get, I'm gonna try to put them into 23, 24, and 25. And like I said, I'll show you what that looks like. But I'm using that to try to, again, get more juice out of this first bond sale.
So, thank you, appreciate it. The tax assessors states that on residential, the blue sheets go out April 15th, commercial goes out on April 30th.
Okay.
You said April 30th?
April 30th for commercial.
Great, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I think I've hit on most of these others. The one thing I'll note is that the current market tax exempt rates that we're running, depending on the term of these new bonds, roughly are again the 2.6 to 2.7%. That's just coincidental that that was the taxable rates, because those taxable rates on those refundings were shorter. If those numbers sound familiar. This is good 20 to 25 year tax exempt rates. The other was short taxable rates. They just happen to be the same. So here's what I'm calling just a sample capacity analysis. I know it's small. It's really just to give you a flavor for what the background looks like when I give you some summary numbers in a minute. So you can see we're forecasting 6% and 5% in this one scenario for 23 and 24 there in the red. We have 4% there in 2025, but it's not really relevant to the capacity we're running. The blue box shows the taxable advance refunding of the Series 2013 bonds. You can see we're targeting the savings like I described in 23, 24, and 25, so negative numbers. This is the change in debt service from doing that transaction.
Negative numbers, talk to me a little
The
bit.
green negative numbers are meaning we're reducing your debt service by that amount.
So, okay, so there's a second question, is what INS rate do we want to maintain? Because the higher we maintain that service, the more money we can borrow.
Correct. So I'm assuming you're holding it the same as it is the current year. And if that changes again, that would impact your capacity.
And say, I'm gonna want, at least from my perspective, I want us to decide and get a projection from you that says, based upon certain growth rates in 23 and 24, and then an INS rate that will allow us to maximize the borrowing so that we can help the cities in the call for project, the 200 million that we spent, or that we asked and allocated to the cities. And we told them to be ready within 3 years to spend that money. If not now, that we wanted it spent within 3 years.
Sure. So again, if you want to change the tax rate, we can work with that. I'll show you sort of the examples here. So the only thing I want to point out, maybe the last thing I'll point on this is in 2025, where we're assuming the 4% growth. If you look on the far right, you can see the tax rate actually drops from that targeted amount, that 0.0154, it drops down to 0.013. And that's creating, that means there's capacity in that year to sell additional debt if you wanted to get back up to that 0.015. This analysis doesn't include that sale, but roughly it's probably in the $55 to $65 million range what you could sell in 2024 and still maintain the same tax rate at that 4% rate. And I give you a range because it kind of depends on what we do with this first issue, what the exact capacity will be. So we're talking about doing 100 plus million and we'll today, and again, kind of do nothing, but based on that 4% out there, you could sell, you would sell no bonds in the summer of 23. You can sell probably 55, 60 million or so in the summer of 24, just so you have that flavor. So now getting to the sort of heart of all the matter. So these are just some various assumptions on what the assessed value growth could be. Again, happy to run more scenarios in the coming year. So these would be the values that we would know this summer, presumably the 5.5, 6 or 6.5. And then we just assumed a 1% reduction to be a little bit more conservative in the following year. And you see what the debt capacity could be for a sale this spring or summer based on those various assumptions. And I'm using 21-year term because if we're accelerating next year's capacity into this year, and you typically sell 20-year debt, it would be the same as selling 21-year debt if we captured next year's capacity and rolled it forward. Happy to do 20-year debt. We could look at 30-year debt. That's a comfort level on your part. I think 21-year debt probably, is fine. I also ran a 25-year scenario, which again, I'm totally comfortable with, just to show you that you could eke out a little bit more capacity at going out a little bit longer.
Will you remind me, you shared this earlier in your presentation, what had been our practice? What year? Was it 20 year?
20 years has been a historical practice, yeah.
Thank you.
If we change the term of the debt, does that have any impact on our rating, credit rating?
Yeah, that's a good question. No, it would not. You would still be AAA. And
AAA is based upon the reserves that we have
it's
to a great extent.
Yeah, the financial soundness, your reserves, the economy, the local economy is huge. Obviously, the governance and conservative financial practices of county staff and the commissioners certainly factor into that. A lot of it is economy driven. I mean, to be honest, and then the sheer amount of debt you have is not very much relative to your tax base. You have a very low debt burden.
So what we're saying on this slide is that if we assume, and I'll go to the bottom line, because I know the court is interested in determining just to sell a significant amount of debt, that we anticipate growth in 23, which actually captures tax values for 22. It would be 6.5%, and then for 24, it would be 5.5%. If we stretch those out to a 25-year payment, we could actually do 135 million. So two questions. I'm making an assumption, or I would make an assumption that while we may do 25-year debt now, as we move forward to sell the rest of the GO amount that was approved by the voters, we could either slide back to a 20-year debt or continue at a 25 or any
Absolutely.
Year. Okay.
Absolutely.
Second of all, did you look to see if we didn't quite hit some of these numbers, that what type of money we would have to supplement from GR to simply cover the debt payment in those 2 years until the values came up so that we could support the debt?
Yeah, I'm going to jump ahead.
Did
That's okay. I'm going to answer that question on this slide, and then we can go back and talk about that. So if we're trying to maintain that current debt tax rate, that 0.10154, And we don't know taxable values. GK said, like, what happens if property values are actually lower than projected? So if you sell bonds, we assume the 6.5%, but they actually come in at 5.5%. And to avoid having to raise your tax rate to pay that debt, essentially a 1% change in the values, which is what I just described, would cost you $350,000 of cash. So you could, the way I term it is like you can buy down the debt service tax rate using cash. So if you add cash to it, you don't have to levy the tax.
So that 1% change would only cost, so if we were using 6.5 and 6.5 instead of 6.5 and 5.5, if it did come in at 5.5 that second year, it would cost us $350,000 to offset that, and that would have to come out of our reserves, of which we have a lot.
Correct. And I just picked 1% to make it simple. I mean, you wouldn't probably want to get too aggressive and say, oh, I want to use $2 million of reserves, because that would be a big change in your tax rate. And it would eventually probably come back and bite you. Essentially, you can't keep doing that one time, with one-time sources of money. You can't make that work for very long if the growth doesn't end up materializing. But that's just the caution to the theory. But that's why I ran it this way, so you would know it's really not that much in the big scheme of things relative to your overall debt. If you did miss it, I worry more. I told GK this. I worry less that that you would actually have to contribute cash. I worry more that we've undervalued it, and that your tax rate would be forced to fall, which is not terrible, but again, it would impact your ability maybe to sell more debt in the future unless you wanted to raise it, right? So if your tax rate, if we don't sell enough debt to hold your tax rate up, or the growth comes in quite a bit higher than you expecting, your tax rate would naturally fall a little bit, just like it did last year. It was like 0.016 last year, and this year it's 0.015. And again, not a bad thing necessarily, but if you're trying to accelerate bond issues and get more projects out the door, you'd probably want to not have that lower. And we talked about a couple of strategies on that. One would be to wait and do the 2013 refunding until this summer when you know your values. We could wait and do the $100 million once you know your values also. But we could then know, if we had more information, we could make sure we didn't undersell it. If we oversell it, again, you just use cash. So oversell it, meaning we've estimated it too much, you use cash. If we estimate too low, your tax rate will fall unless we can prop it up somehow.
And I guess here's where I'm at least wanting to see some projections. I think we have more than enough reserves to be able to buy down if some of those assumptions are there. I am very concerned about if we wait from, let's say we could get the issue out in May versus getting the issue out in August, then I think that's June, July, and August that we're going to see a quarter point increase in rates from the Fed. Now, what that does to us, who knows? But if you're telling me that we're going to get almost of a point, 100 basis points or 75 basis points in the 3 months between May and August, then I have to believe that's going to have some impact on the cost of our borrowing money. So at least some projections that I would like to see. I would like to see a 6.5% growth rate for 23 and 24. I would like to see a tax rate, instead of being about 1.6 to be about 2. Because I also believe that less than, or let's just say it was a half a cent, because Helen's, I'm sure, and Renee is thinking, a half a penny is about $13 million that would be shifted from GR over to debt service. And I believe that we have more than enough of that. Our carry forward has been moving up by more than that, or very close to that, I believe, on an annual basis. And if it's not, then we've got a little bit of reserve, again, as we move forward and out that way.
Okay.
And I would like to see a 25, I don't really want to see a 30. I don't want to go out that far.
25 is...
25 year.
But I'd like to see a 25. So 6.5, 6.5, 2 pennies, 25 years.
Yep.
And I mean, and then at least that gives us the next, and if anybody else has any other options that they'd like to see, then I think that gives us the information that at least I need in saying, okay, I'm ready to, I feel pretty confident that I'm ready to pull the trigger. I also feel pretty confident that I don't necessarily want to leave, whether it be 2 million or 4 million on the table for refunding. So I'm probably more apt and ready to move forward with refunding. You can still work on me,
That's fine.
but they'll tell you good luck. But I think I just need to see that, but I do think I want to move forward pretty rapidly because I do think rates are going to continue to go up, and I do believe that the Ukrainian deal is not going to do anything but help him go up even more. So that concerns me too.
That's right.
Yeah, the full speed ahead schedule, like, so we could probably be in the market in mid-May would be
If that's the full speed ahead, then that's as fast as we can get it
maybe
there.
early May. Yeah, I mean, once we get direction, then we can start, working on an offering document, that sort of thing fairly quickly.
What you're asking for is something we can bring back next week. That's a fairly simple calculation.
Yep, I can.
I too am ready to pull the trigger. There are too many variables out there that are moving in all kinds of different directions for us to sit and dither.
And I would,
Let's go with what we know right now and get her done.
and I would ask budget and audit, again, from the standpoint, if we move up to 2 pennies, that is pulling some, I think it's pulling a little less than, whatever a penny raises for us. And I think, GK, you say a penny raises about 26 million?
Yeah, our AV is about, I think it'd be about 26 million. And our current INS rate is 105, or 015. So we're talking about,
It sounds like
13, 14 million.
that, from a capacity standpoint, you're going to be able to sell quite a bit if you're willing to raise the tax rate. I'll say there is one.
We're not willing to raise the overall tax rate.
Right, the debt service tax rate, I
but believe that we
understand.
can.
Yes.
So the only other
Shift the tax.
Reallocate the tax rate.
Right.
Right.
The only other thing
Don't
we
say
need to
raise.
Yes.
make sure is that we have to make sure we do a good faith effort that we believe that we can expend those funds in a 3-year period after we issue them. That's a requirement. And looking at some of the information that transportation has given us as far as the needs for the initial $200 million, and we have others transportation issues. We want to also look at funding. Commissioner Brooks, we still have that big multi-jurisdictional one out in your precinct.
It makes me nervous that it's still hanging out there and we're not committed to it.
Well, as soon as we do this, we'll move forward on that. Plus, that will also give you some money in your discretionary funds that you all can place, and so we just need to make sure we're comfortable with that. We've looked at the charts that transportation has sent us, and in a good faith effort, I think that we can get there.
I see transportation in the back. Let's look, and if we need to communicate with the cities that are in that first 200 million in the call for projects or any of the other items that we feel like may be out there. I mean, I hear what GK is saying.
We've already contacted them, Judge. That's the information we're using.
Okay.
And transportation has been working with those jurisdictions to see when they're ready to go, not only in the planning stage, but also in the construction stage.
Okay, so then will you just recap what the next step is?
So what we'll do then for next week, we'll take, and if there's any other scenarios that the court would like to see, just let us know, because these scenarios, it's easy for me to say they're not that difficult to run, but Hilltop has always been able to turn them around in a day or so. And so we have a 6.5, and an INS rate of 2 cents. And we'll run those, and Any other scenarios? We're gonna run those at a 25-year. Is that okay with you all?
Yes,
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good with
I would
that.
suggest if you all are comfortable with 25.
from
we should-
0.15 to 0.20, is that what we're talking?
Yes, sir, it's a half a cent. And we communicate with, our office runs a point on a lot of this, but our office continually communicates with the auditor's office and also with budget on everything that you're seeing on this type of issue. So we'll come back and circle back with them also.
Okay.
So if there's, like I said, if there's any other scenarios you'd like for us to run, just let us know, and we'll go ahead and make sure that Hilltop runs those things for us.
Thank you.
Okay, okay. Any other comments? Okay, if not, then we have direction on that, and then we're gonna go ahead and move forward on it. If we can go back to the agenda then, as I said, on item number 4, we're going to hold for a week, and we'll bring that back to next week, so we will agendize it properly so we can take action. And, Your Honor, members of court, that's all we have on our section at this time.
Okay, Ms. Tindall?
We have one item for the court to consider this morning, and that's asking that you approve the release of the $62 million of collateral as outlined in the attached documents related to the court communication.
Move for approval?
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Ms. Glenn?
Move to receive and file personnel agenda.
Second?
We have a motion, a second, to receive and file the personnel agenda. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Hi, Tina.
Good morning, thank you. We have a few more items for the court this morning. The second item, we're asking for an extension and an out-of-class pay arrangement that we have in Constable Precinct 7. Constable Lee is requesting an extension of out-of-class pay for her senior deputy constable through June 14th, the details of which are outlined in your court communique. We're estimating the cost to the general fund to be almost $1,400. That does include fringe benefits.
Move approval.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
So the next two items are our long-awaited benefit agreements. So item number 3 is our Delta Dental service agreement. The court will recall that Delta Dental in 2022 replaced Cigna for our dental as our dental vendor and claims administrator. So as explained in your court communique, we're looking at administrative costs of about $135,000 in 2022. And as a reminder, employees pay 100% of their premiums for dental services. This is a 5-year contract agreement, and it's effective 1/1/2022. If you have a quizzical look.
Move approval.
Second?
We have a motion, a second. Yes. Why is it, if it's pretty much self-insured, why do we have a fiscal year impact?
So this, again, this is the administrative services portion of it. So this is the PPO plan. And so for employees, members, retirees who use the PPO plan, there are administrative services such as processing claims that Delta Dental provides for us. They make payments to providers. So that's the estimated cost of what it will cost to cover those services. So there are two contracts, so maybe this might help. So this is the PPO Administrative Services Agreement, and then we have scheduled for next week the DHMO, which is the Dental Health Maintenance Organization, and there are no administrative fees associated with that one.
So the question becomes the revenue source to pay the 135. Does that come out of general revenue issues, or does that come out of funding by the employees that pay their premiums?
I thought all of it, I thought, that is the question, and I thought all of that was built into the premium that we were being,
It very well could
as
be.
employees that were paying. And so if that's the case, again, Renee or Helen, tell me how that has a budget impact on the county.
Well, we still have to contract for the services, and we're still liable for the services, even if the funding source is the employees' premiums.
So it's not really costing taxpayers money, it's costing
No.
the plan,
The plan has to pay it,
okay.
and so you're gonna pay it, and then you're gonna recoup your payment
From
the
premiums.
premiums that the employees paid, they're deducted out of their
Okay.
paychecks.
As long as,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's-
because I had thought we were.
It's
I
a
mean,
revenue stream question.
Yeah, it's a revenue stream, and that revenue stream is coming from the participants in the plan
That's correct.
each year.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
And so item number 4 is the agreement with Vision Service Plan Insurance Company Services, better known as VSP. The court may recall that VSP became our vision service provider in 2022. They replaced IMED, who was in place prior to 2022. Again, just with, as with dental services, vision services, the premiums are 100% funded by members, employees, and retirees. This is a 6-year contract, and it's effective 1/1/2022.
See that quizzical look
It's
again?
the same equation.
But I didn't think that, no, I didn't think Vision was self-insured by the folks that were in that. We have a second, we had a motion.
We didn't have one. I was getting ready to make a motion. Motion. Move for approval.
Second.
So premiums are completely funded by, or paid by members. The county has never contributed or subsidized premium costs. And so the premiums cover the cost of the services.
Yeah, both.
Well, the reason because it used to be a part of the health plan. And then the vision got separated out from the health plan, and we got a separate deal for it. But I never thought it was a fully self-insured plan for just those, because you remember, I always ask for the reserve balance, or how much do we have in there for the dental, but I have not asked for before now for what the balance is on the vision plan. And so, Renee,
I don't know off the top of my head, sir.
well, I didn't figure you would, but
I'll find out and make sure you.
Yeah, and recall that we've only had this vision separate and apart from medical for, I don't know, maybe 5 years.
it's not been that
super
long.
long
See, that's the
time.
whole thing. When we separated that, I don't ever remember us saying that that was supposed to be a plan that was 100% funded by the participants. And that the county didn't subsidize. And I knew the county didn't subsidize it, but I don't well, I say I do that. I'm not sure I knew that or not. I just knew that that's the amount that we said we were charging for the vision plans. Okay?
It's a self-contained plan.
We can get you the reserves, all the numbers on that. And that should be, of course, I don't have to do it, but.
Yeah, it's real easy for us, don't
We'll ask the people who know.
Now, Laura's already, she's already kind of saying, yeah, you don't have to do this.
You're welcome.
Any other discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Judge, if I could just publicly acknowledge James Nichols. James Nichols is the attorney in the Criminal District Attorney's Office who, for the past several years, has helped us wrangle and wrestle these contracts, and so he really stays on them until they're ready to come before you all. So we want to appreciate his efforts. And again, we have one last contract, and that's the dental DHMO contract, and that is agendized for next week.
Well, I sure want to thank him because
Yeah,
this
he
is
does it.
substantially earlier than what we've had.
He does a great job. He and his counterpart at Dallas actually work these contracts on behalf of all of the PEBC groups, so we want to thank him publicly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Melissa? Come on down. Thank you, Amber.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, we have 4 items for your consideration. The first item is an award recommendation for bid number 2022-063. This is our annual contract for fuel, countywide, awarding to the primary vendor, Jack Ray Oil, and the secondary, Douglas Distribution, per unit cost, per unit price.
Move for approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
And the second item is a request for approval of invoice payment for a service call for Precinct 4 to Overhead Door Fort Worth in the amount of $575. Precinct 4 employee reached out to this vendor who is no longer on our contract. They were on that contract, the last contract expired in September, and they were the previous vendor on that contract. So he called the wrong vendor.
Whoops.
Move approval.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
And the third item is regarding bid number 2020-003. This is our annual contract for office supplies and other miscellaneous products countywide with Staples Contract and Commercial. We're requesting approval of a price increase. The average price increase is estimated to be about 11.41%, and there will be no other price increases for the remainder of the calendar year, and the bid does allow for this. And Staples also included in the backup letters from all the manufacturers, the major manufacturers we buy from, which have had price increases this year.
That feels steep.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. So when would be the next opportunity to go out for an RFP if we were to choose to do so?
Well, every year we could go out for a rebid. So we have, I believe, 2 more options. It's a 5-year contract. So this is a 2020, we're in the 3rd year. So we could not exercise the 2 options to renew and go out and rebid it.
Well, if we go out, I mean, you're saying 5-year renewals? So we could potentially
has
be in
4
this thing to
renewals.
2035?
I'm sorry?
So we could be in this thing to 2035?
5 one-year renewals.
5 1-year renewals,
Yes.
not 2 5-year renewals. Okay.
Yeah, 4 1-year renewals. It's the 5-year is the first period with 4 renewals. So ultimately, it's a 5-year contract normally. Okay. But we can not exercise that option to renew and rebid.
I mean, we got a motion and a second. I'm supportive of going ahead and do it, but I think we need, when we start talking about 11%, we need to at least get out there and do a look-see and see if there's possibility of any better one. Maybe not this year for 23, but, because I know this is not a simple little RFP.
It's not, and we spend roughly a little over $500,000, and we did an estimate based on what that increase would look like, and it would be somewhere between $12,000 and $22,000.
I understand that, but the problem is we have a bunch of people who piggyback off us.
Yes, we do.
And so, you know, if we're going to be that responsible party, then we have to be that responsible party. And I think we owe it not only to ourselves, but we owe it to I mean, we buy a lot of office supplies through that contract. You said we buy about 500. How much is total bought through that contract?
About $6 million.
Yeah. So I think we have to do that as you know, if we're gonna be the one that's gonna be the purchasing agent for all those people, then we're gonna have to do that from that standpoint, so.
Okay, will do.
Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
And the fourth and last item is regarding RFP number 2021-123. This is the COVID-19 Needs and Resource Assessment. and related support for the County Administrator's Office with innovative emergency management. We're requesting contract approval. It's a contract amendment for additional services estimated in the amount of $649,044, and the funding source is ARPA FRF funds. They've completed the assessment, and now it's time to implement the work.
Move for approval.
I'll second. What is the contract term for this?
So what this will do, this will basically now move us to the point that when we have a call for projects and all the things that have to occur, like setting up websites, doing the analysis of all the different programs that submit, monitor those and help manage those through the entire term of ARPA. So this funding would be something that would eventually run out with 2024, somewhere in there. This would be a tremendous relief on staff. This.
Yeah, I get it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any further discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Melissa, when would you need to start the RFP for office supplies? Because
Yes.
what we just approved was 23, is that correct?
Yes. So we're approving to complete the term of this calendar year.
Calendar or fiscal?
It starts with well, I'm not sure. I'll have to look at the dates
Okay.
for sure.
I just want to be sure that we begin the process.
Oh, yeah, we'll start early. We normally start early with the renewal.
Okay.
And then this came across.
Yeah.
And next week we'll bring back the rebate. Okay. We've already received the rebate, and we didn't realize that it was sent directly to the auditor, so I was just curious about it. Had the money been received, and found out that yes, it had been deposited. So Staples didn't do a great job of letting me know ahead of time. So.
And they send money directly to all of the other entities?
Yes, and that will be on the list as well, how much each entity received will also be.
So that helps mitigate the
It does.
It does.
price increase.
I think we're receiving roughly about 130-something thousand.
That's pretty good.
Okay.
Thanks.
And in fairness to Staples also from that standpoint, a couple of years, well, it was second year in, I guess, they increased, and we passed that increase on directly to all of the customers that are all of the other entities that are piggybacking on the contract that our purchasing department did.
Right.
Now, maybe we ought to attach a little bill for that, but we hadn't done that yet.
No, we haven't.
Thank you. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you.
Are there any appointments today? Commissioner Fickus?
I have two. First one is to the Northern Tennessee Groundwater Conservation District. This would be William Gladbach, PE, appoint him.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Then I have an appointment to the Historical Commission. Willard Ray Thomas. Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
I need to reappoint Jarrett Jackson to the Building Line Adjustment Board.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
I have two appointments.
Okay.
I would like to reappoint Alice Moore to the Building Line Adjustment Board.
Second.
And
Go ahead and give us your other one.
pardon me?
Go ahead and give us your second one.
Yeah, my second one is Rick Brunson to the 911 Emergency Assistant District. and I move approval of both.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Any additional appointments? There being none, then we'll move on to the claims, including the addendum.
Move approval of the claims, including the addendum.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the claims, including the addendum. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Briefing items, Mr. Mangus.
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the Court, we have two additional items this morning. First, we'd like to go to item B, which is the Mental Health Jail Diversion Center update. Ms. Garnett is here to address the court at this time.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, Susan.
So we're going to talk just a little bit about the Mental Health Jail Diversion Center and just catch you up with where we are. I never remember how to work this thing. I'm going to thank you all for your leadership and your support for making Tarrant County's Mental Health Jail Diversion Center get off the ground in such a short amount of time. And I'm going to give you just a little bit of a status update, and I know that you've been provided with a red folder that has some of the reports that we've provided to the administrator's office. So I'm just going to remind you that we have moved really at lightning speed. We identified, and you all identified and purchased a building. It was occupied by another entity, and they closed out their business. Just as an FYI to you, we did offer jobs to all of the staff in that building, and most of them took the jobs with us at MHMR, so we're grateful to have those staff with us. But we did identify there were some small essential modifications that needed to take place before we could open. And really, in just a couple of months, the staff, the facility staff here from the county did yeoman's work in getting everything moving so that we could go ahead and get started. We were prepared to get the program off the ground at the end of December, and then Omicron hit, and we didn't have enough staff to staff it. So we had to wait a couple more weeks. So we actually got started in January. And we all came to the decision that the program would start with accepting guests from all departments except Fort Worth and Arlington. We wanted to lower the census initially so we could work through some of the bugs that might emerge initially. And in fact, bugs did emerge. And we did find some things that we needed to make adjustments on in our processes. We anticipated how individuals would come to the building. We needed to make some changes for that. We anticipated some initial screenings that we would need to do and how we would identify people. We've identified some adjustments we need to make in those screening processes. But we feel like we've got the process going now. We feel like we're ready to move forward. So we've actually invited both Fort Worth and Arlington now to bring individuals to the center. So our census, as you'll see, has been fairly low, but that's exactly as we anticipated. It has really been, you all know, many of you know that we've had community meetings with neighbors. We have the advisory committee that has had its initial meetings. We have another one scheduled in the next week, I think, Monday. Yes, Monday. We'll continue to work with the advisory committee. We certainly have identified some things that are important to people. I will tell you that our friends at the criminal DA's office graciously offered us a popcorn machine, and people like popcorn. It turns out that people like the smell of popcorn when they come into a program a lot. 100% of the people that have come to us have been homeless so far. And we don't know if that's, the officers who are identifying people initially, choosing people who they think really, really need these kinds of supports, or if we can anticipate for the future that it'll be primarily homeless people. We just don't really know that at this point. But so far, that's what we've seen. We have a great relationship we're very grateful for with Acclaim and JPS to provide medical supports for people. There have been occasions where people arrive at the diversion center, but they really need more medical care. We established that during the initial assessment, and we're able to move people over to JPS. But we take care of that. The officer who's brought the individual is released quite quickly to return to his duties. We're working, of course, with Tarrant County Homeless Coalition, ensuring that because all these individuals have been homeless, that we want to see them on the homeless management information system. We want them processed through that system. We work with both TCHC and other community partners to make sure that people can get the documents that they need and can get some of the things that they're going to need in order to move forward with their life. Just a reminder that everybody who comes to this program is a voluntary participant in the program. If somebody arrives and they, on reflection, when they've arrived, decide they do not want to remain in the facility, they don't have to remain in the facility. And in fact, we would have no mechanism to really require that they continue to stay in the facility. For those individuals who have decided they want to leave, we give them a ride to either back to where they began or to a location that's is desirable for them.
How frequently does that occur?
You know, it has happened several times in the first couple of months of operations. We've had occasion where somebody left and then came back and said, come to think of it, I do want to stay. So, you know, we think that's going to happen, and we think that's a combination of, you know, the way we present information to the person about what they can achieve by participating, as well as officer education so that they're able to think through and establish that the individual that they plan to bring really does want to stay in the facility. So we think it's kind of a combination that we're going to be working on. And Ramey, you all know Ramey Heddens, and Ramey and his staff are doing a lot of work with departments to ensure that they know they can bring somebody, know that we're going to work through it. We're working through the processes so that the officer can move quite rapidly through the process and then return to his duty, but just to make sure that they have the information they need so that they can make a good decision. We know that officers, in addition to bringing people to us, are calling the Law Liaison Program that you all are familiar with, where we provide supports and information to police officers in the field who are making decisions about where an individual who they believe has mental illness can best be served. So we're fielding a lot of those kind of questions, and we think that that will be helpful in increasing the census, because we want to increase the census, and we anticipate that the inclusion of individuals that Fort Worth and Arlington departments bring to us are going to increase the census fairly rapidly. You know, this is a program that certainly has a lot of attention from us, but it has a lot of attention otherwise. We actually have visitors coming from Lubbock next week. I think there's like 20 people coming from Lubbock to take a look at it, because they anticipate a center like this also.
Susan, how many beds do we now have available?
We have 10 right now.
Okay. When do we get the other beds online?
I think facilities is here. I think they're in the process of increasing that. And primarily has to do with showers, and all that might.
Good morning, Judge. Good morning, members of the court.
Hi, Mike.
The vendor that is going to be retrofitting those showers, all the parts will be in this week. They will arrive on site on the 21st, next Monday. It'll take 2 weeks. We'll have the remaining 23 showers completed.
So by April,
Yes, sir.
we should be at full capacity?
Full capacity. With the anti-ligature security level showers.
Okay.
And that's a really good point. The adjustments that need to be made, or the modifications that need to be made, are really for safety purposes, the anti-ligature strategies that are used to ensure that people are safe in community settings like this. So, you know, we have seen some really good examples. I think things that we can all feel good about as we provided services to people. I'll tell you, Ramey and I were talking last week about, well, let's talk about some of the, where does it really work for people? And you know, we heard these really interesting stories of a woman who came to us who had been victimized and had also committed some offenses that brought her to the police department's attention. And she came into us, and she had been a victim of assaults herself. She had been a victim of trauma in her life. So this really gave her, this center gave her an opportunity to work through some of that trauma that she had faced, and to identify that she had relatives, she had family who wanted to be connected to her, but they were in another state, and she kind of just hadn't been able to find the bridge to get from here to there. So we made that connection for her, and her family wanted her to come back. We were able to arrange for transportation to her to another state, where she actually discovered, while she was in the center, she discovered that she had a job that was available to her again, and that she could go back to her job. So she has moved back to her family, to her job, and to her life. And reflected how much she appreciated that this just gave her a pause that enabled her to get out of what her life had been and move to another life. And so, our staff are grateful to be a part of that. And we had another example of an individual who came to us whose primary language was Vietnamese and English as second language. And he was quiet and not particularly communicative. And one of our nurses noticed that it was his birthday. And she went to a local Vietnamese restaurant and purchased food and arranged for a little event on behalf of his birthday there at the center, which really opened up to him and opened him up to conversation with us. He identified connections that he wanted to make with a temple here. He's made those connections. He's now connected with those folks, and it looks like that may be his path to a healthier life. So. We're grateful to be able to be a part of making these kinds of changes in people's lives. At MHMR, our tagline is "We change lives," and it's really a one-by-one process to do that. But it's not something that we do. It's something that really a community does, and that you all have provided the leadership to do that. I'll just show you a couple more pictures if you haven't seen the center yet. The original one was the first, the front part of the building. You'll notice there's no signs out there that say it's a jail diversion center or anything. This is really in the back where it kind of looks like a winter landscape right now, but it's going to look green one of these days.
It might be because it's winter.
Yeah, it will look green one of these days. And actually we have some staff who've identified that they would like to use those central planting areas for some vegetable gardening, so that, because we know that people in many of our programs participate in gardening programs with the agricultural service, and those are really, really helpful for folks. They're great. We love those. That's just a picture inside of the facility, and it's really just a very comfortable living room kind of setting where we really want people to have a chance to think. Somebody working with an individual who's come to the center, and this is really just a program that we are really proud to be a part of, and thankful that you all put this program in our trust and want to work with you in any way. So we do have the upcoming advisory committee, but we want people who have comments or concerns to raise to bring them to us and let us work through them, and we're glad to do that. We always know that we start these programs with the best ideas in mind, and then we need to make adjustments to make it really work in the real world. So with that, we'll stop and see if any other questions anybody has.
To what extent have we been able to change the homeless status of the clients that we have served?
You want to talk about that?
Yeah, well, primarily right now, we haven't put someone.
Will
in
you
a
come to the
permanent
mic,
housing-
please? Right.
We haven't put someone in a permanent housing situation, but we transitioned folks to our CRU, our crisis residential unit. We've also moved some folks into some group homes. But what we've applied with housing.
So we've got them in a process.
That's correct.
That should lead to housing.
Yes, sir. We put them in the process, and being a part of the HMIS system, we're able to check if they already have that process started and where we can add to it, or if we need to go ahead and start it. So,
what data are we collecting on the people that move through the program, especially as relates to their social determinants?
So when they come in, they're assessed by our medical staff, and also, we're a certified community behavioral health center, and that's a big part of what we look at. So we have a risk stratification that addresses those issues. So
we do collect that data, and we do track it?
Yes,
So
sir.
did you have more question? So I had a question on, oh wait, you may have answered it. 1 second. Okay, nope, you answered it. I'm good.
So we provide regular reports to the court and or to the county, and you can imagine we collect far more information than we provide to you. We just synthesize down. But if you find yourself needing additional information, let us know. It's not a problem to us to collect additional information. Now's the time to build any kind of difference in data collection. As we're starting, is the time to do that.
I guess one of the questions that I have, our average length of stay, we had started out thinking, okay, it's going to be around 3 days. I noticed that we were at about 80 hours in January, and we're up to about 144. So are we being too optimistic?
So I would say a couple of things. Yeah, a couple of things. Right now, we don't have a census that causes us to have to move people more rapidly through. So as we're working through the bugs of getting people to move from one step to another, we've been okay if people stay a little longer. I will tell you, we see better outcomes when people stay a little longer. But we anticipate there will be a time when the census will be such that we won't really be able to have people staying longer in that location, but we may have better pathways into other locations then.
I know you talked about this, but we haven't yet opened up to Fort Worth and Arlington.
We just did the third, yeah.
On the third.
Yeah. So we haven't seen the big numbers yet, but then it's going to take a while to work through their processes of ensuring that all officers know that they can bring somebody.
Because I see we only did about half the number of people in February as we did in January. Of course, it was a little chilly to be outside in February. From that perspective, I guess.
Yeah, so I think it's going to take ongoing efforts to be sure that departments are educated and the word has to spread between officers. Once they have a successful drop-off, the word will spread between officers, we think.
Yeah, and it's really taking maybe 5-10 minutes. It's really short for the officers.
Well, and I saw that you had quite a few, about a third refused voluntarily in January, but that was down to only 1 in February.
And I think a big part of that is there's 2 things. The way we approach individuals when they come in the door, I think we've learned how to do that better, to engage them better. And also, I think the officers that brought people in are bringing more appropriate folks in. In other words, someone who's probably more likely to stay versus someone who may have some other issues that might keep them from staying.
And you've got popcorn now.
And we got popcorn.
Well, they want to stay just long enough for that officer that brought them in to get back out.
Yeah, so I'll just use this as an example of that. When we first opened, we had the officer driving in, bringing the individual into the building. And then the exchange of the individual happened. And what we've found as more helpful is when we have an individual who is a peer, a person with lived experience. When we know the officer calls ahead to tell us that somebody's coming, and we have the peer go outside, and the officer pulls up, and the officer can go to our staff, and the peer will meet the individual, and they begin right then working together. So that's an example of kind of adjustments we've made to make it all make more sense to people.
That's great, because they feel a little bit more welcome.
Could I ask that for the next 6 months or so, Ramey, that you come and give us a report once a month?
Absolutely.
Don't want to burden you with that, Susan.
We're very glad. One or the other of us will be here every time.
Okay.
But we feel good about where we are. It's a very, very, very new program. We're still building the plane that's flying, but we think we're going to get to good places here. So we're grateful to be a part of it. Thank you.
I do have a question, but first a request to go along with Commissioner Brooks's request for the monthly update is in the reports. I guess these come from Chandler. Is if we can go ahead and start adding in each month.
Sure.
So that we can see the cumulative numbers. Yeah.
That was a report that MHMR provided to our office.
Okay.
We try to monitor that, but absolutely, we'll do a monthly deal for you.
Okay, great. And then
But you want a cumulative number. You want to be able to see month over month.
Yeah, month over month. Mm-hmm. So then my question on the report, there is a line for number of persons enrolled in JPS connections. So does that mean that the client was enrolled prior to coming to the center, or they were enrolled as a result of coming to the center?
You've identified something that we had to ask ourselves a number of times.
Okay.
We think we need to work on that one.
Okay.
Because, we really intended to use it as a vehicle to ensure that we are enrolling people who are in JPS Connection. We find on rare occasions that people are already connected, but that's pretty rare.
Yeah.
So I think we need to, we actually were talking about that the other day, that we're going to work with Chandler to maybe adjust the deliverables a little bit so they have more usefulness for you.
Very good. Okay, thank you.
When we couldn't figure out what we were reporting, we knew we needed to work on that.
Thank you all for the tremendous job you've done in getting us to this point.
Yeah.
And I look forward to seeing us at full capacity with all the bugs worked out.
Well, we're going to work on it, and we've told our upcoming visitors from Lubbock that what was really essential was that this was a number of entities working together to make this happen, and thus they're bringing 20 people so that they have a whole bunch of people who from different organizations who will be a part of it.
And one more thing, we are able to track the clients once they're released from the facility and know what services they've accessed, what improvements those services have made to their life course. I want to know that longitudinally we've made a difference.
Yeah, that's the goal. For individuals that we can keep track of, we're going to keep track of them. Because the goal is to follow them in the community as well.
Yes.
Right. So for an individual who comes into our service system, absolutely, we will be able to follow that individual. For an individual who chooses not to participate in our system, we'll still be trying to figure out where they are and what's happened with them. But we may not be able, because it's a voluntary program, we may not be able to track every individual, but our goal is to track as many as we can and see which things worked and which things didn't work.
Are you maintaining them on mental health
detention
services or
yes
through MHMR or through JPS?
It would be primarily services through us, because we think that the individuals who come to this center are most likely to need a level of intensiveness in terms of outpatient community supports that are more supports from our system rather than theirs. Although it's likely that they will also be interfaced with JPS for a variety of things, including potentially mental health.
At some point, they will be transitioned to JPS for long-term.
Well, we really see people long-term. It's more likely that individuals leave our system and go to JPS when they're pretty stable, and they might need, for example, medications, but they might only need to see the doctor a couple of times a year. If they need supports like for housing, employment, rehabilitation services in the community, those things, the individual stays with us. So it's really the stable person who would move to JPS. The person who needs a lot of community interventions would stay with us.
Okay, I got it.
And how, I'm somewhere in here HIPAA raises its ugly head.
So, obviously we have the authority to have those people's medical records and to work with other affiliated entities that we have business relationships with. In the case of JPS and MHMR, we have business relationships. So there's mechanisms through which, through our electronic health records, we can exchange information for the purpose of continuity of care.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
Wonderful. Thanks,
Susan.
Thank you all.
So we have one more presentation, but as we're changing the slide deck, Ms. Tewell, did you have a comment on the issues?
Related to the question that you asked about the reserve of the division plan, my understanding from my staff is that it's a fully insured plan, and the employees pay the premium, so the reserve is zero.
Good. That makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, I think that we're ready to do our final presentation, and this one is a presentation that we've asked the Council of Governments to make. Let me lay it out just a little bit, and then I'll introduce Lori to you. This is an item that Commissioner Allen had come forward with, and we had met with her office and a private nonprofit entity that was promoting the the electric vehicle charging stations, and the COG has a grant opportunity. And so we have asked Lori to, this is Lori Clark. She is the program director at COG on this particular item. She also has staff members Amy Hodges and Jared Wright that have come with her today. So Lori, I'm going to turn it over to you and ask you to present.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Hi, how are you? Hi.
Hi, Laura.
Good morning. Well, afternoon, I think. Good morning. So, thank you so much for having me today. I'm excited to share this information with y'all and look forward to any questions that you may have. But we do have a funding opportunity, a call for projects out right now for electric vehicle charging stations. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on just kind of setting the stage in the background. So the map that you've got in your packet or on the slide, this is a map that outlines in red are the different cities throughout the region, and the darker the shade of red, the more electric vehicles are registered in that city. And then the dots show electric vehicle charging infrastructure. So we see this continuous increase in interest in electric vehicles and adoption of electric vehicles. That's something that's good for our region from an air quality perspective. They have zero tailpipe emissions. It helps us in our efforts to attain ozone standards. And so far, we've generally been keeping pace with how much infrastructure we need to support the electric vehicles that are on the ground right now. We have, if you look at just sheer numbers, we have about the right amount of infrastructure. But if you look at the map and you look at the dots, you can see that that infrastructure is not evenly distributed. We've got clusters, example in Tarrant County, immediately southwest of downtown Fort Worth, a really nice density of charging stations, but then you've got big parts of the county that are pretty sparse. So what you see in the green and the yellow dots, the green are the DC fast charge stations. These are the types of charging stations that provide about 200 miles of range in an hour. The yellow are the level 2 stations that are
So
about...
when you said 200 miles in an hour, does that mean you have to sit there while it's charging for an hour in order to get 200 miles?
It would take 1 hour to provide the power to take you 200 miles. Now, just like in a gasoline vehicle, you don't want to roll up to a charger when you're completely empty, right? You want to have some fuel still left in the battery, some fuel still left in the tank, so you're kind of using it as an opportunity to top off. But that charging station, the rate of power, that's just kind of a way to kind of explain the ratio of power. About 200 miles possible in about an hour for a DC fast charge station, about 20 miles of power or of range in an hour for a level 2 station. So it's DC fast charge station is about 10 times as fast in terms of how much power it's providing to the car. So what we're trying to do with this funding opportunity is help address a couple needs in the region. One is to fill those gaps in infrastructure so that the infrastructure is more equitably available, more consistently available across the entire region. And the second thing we want to do is help fleets also electrify. We know most of the fleets in the region, public sector fleets, city and county fleets, do want to electrify. Infrastructure availability has been one of the barriers. So if we can help build out charging stations that are on property owned by the public sector that are well placed to serve the public sector itself, hopefully we can help address both things at the same time. The next thing that we want to do is try to just prepare the region for what's coming in terms of the industry change. So this slide, it reads, and I'll give credit to Jared Wright on our staff, he's the one who was able to visualize this for us. All of the different commitments that have been made by auto manufacturers in terms of how they're shifting to electrification. So if we look at Ford and GM, if you look at the little orange wedges of the circles here, that orange wedge represents what % of total sales will be electric vehicles. So what this is saying is Ford, third line down, is going to be selling 40% of their global sales will be electric by the year 2030. If we go down to GM, their aspirational statement is 100% of all of their sales will be electric by 2035.
That means we hope.
Yes, I would say that is the definition of aspiration, yes. But you can see that 2030 is a really major year across the board for a lot of OEMs. So if this industry shift happens the way the automakers are saying that they're planning to do things, that we want to get out in front of it and make sure that the infrastructure is available to help everybody, fleets and the general public alike, be ready for that transition.
So we have a little bit of money. This is available to all public sector organizations. The Regional Transportation Council has a clean fleet policy. That is something that is required. Tarrant County has adopted that policy, so if that's something that y'all were thinking about, you're in good shape there. In terms of eligible activities, we're making funds available for both types of charging stations because different charging stations are better in different scenarios. The key question is really how long does somebody stay at a given place? Is it a property where they may show up, stay for several hours, and then they leave? Or is it a property where people are in and out, 30 minutes at a time or something like that? That's one of those key considerations, and we want to let everybody make their own best decision there. The full spectrum of costs from design, engineering, purchase, installation, and construction is eligible, but not operations and maintenance. And then funding, we have about $1 million available, congestion mitigation, air quality improvement money. We will pay 100% of the cost with those federal funds, and we have a pool of regional transportation development credits that we will use as match. In terms of some of the key requirements, in terms of location, Tarrant County is part of the non-attainment area. Congratulations, you're in the cool kids club with us in terms of non-attainment status.
Yeah, I'm not sure I want to be a part of that.
Right. But the good news is that gives you opportunity to compete for this money, and as well as all of the other cities and public agencies within the county. Stations to be eligible would need to be on public sector property, be co-located with existing parking and development. This is really to help streamline environmental clearance when we get to that stage. We don't want to see charging stations being put in green space at the moment because we want the environmental clearance to move through quickly. In terms of design requirements, we're looking for stations that there's certain industry standards about the actual architecture of the plug that connects to the car. So those are technical details there. Some recommendations on ADA accessibility. And then the one that I really want to focus on is the correspondence from the utility. One of the cardinal rules in building out charging station infrastructure is to speak with your utility early and often. And so requiring some correspondence as part of the application just helps make sure that conversation has been started and ensures that the particular project is something that is feasible within the implementation window that we have, which is pretty aggressive. We're just going to have a little over a year from the point that we award projects to actually get everything operational. And then in terms of the operational requirements, to be available to the public at no cost. And this is really a requirement to help streamline administrative burden. If there was any revenue created in conjunction with use of these stations, that would be classified as program income and then would have to be accounted for and administratively processed accordingly. And then, of course, this is federal funding, so there are some standard implementation requirements on procurement, property management. The one that I really want to call out here is Buy America. The Federal Highway Administration has a very, very strict definition of Buy America compliance. They require 100% of all iron, steel, protective coatings to be domestic content, domestic origin, domestic assembly. We do believe there are charging stations that meet that requirement. There's probably not a big variety of them, but we believe that they're there, and our staff, of course, can provide assistance to anybody who is interested in navigating that. And then again, complete and operational by July of 2023. So the way we'll be selecting projects once they're submitted to us, we're going to do a competitive scoring up to 100 points. 75 of those points will be based on a goal to advance electrification. That is partly looking at filling gaps in the existing infrastructure network. And so there's a variety of locational elements that play into that, and also enabling new fleet electrification. We're interested in that fleet aspect because as we build charging stations, especially in areas where there are not yet a lot of electric vehicles adopted, we want to make sure that they're still useful and they're still used. And so if the fleet is also looking to use the charging stations, it gives us some certainty that those stations will be valuable kind of right out of the gate. Serving communities prioritized by the Justice 40 initiative. This is the Biden administration's initiative to ensure that 40% of the benefit of federal programs goes to Justice 40 communities. I think we're still waiting for the official definition of a Justice 40 community from the White House and for the official methodology, but in the meantime, we'll be looking.
About July of 24.
Yep. looking to Department of Justice and Department of Transportation and Department of Energy have developed a joint office and will be using their guidance. And then we would like to see stations that include strategies to minimize impacts to the electrical grid. And then the other 25 points are associated with our burden, our administrative work to oversee the project. Excuse me. So one of the things that we would really like to see is some additional documentation submitted with the application that helps us streamline. I want to talk just a moment about that goal to fill in infrastructure gaps. This map just shows a 5-mile buffer around all of the charging stations that we have in the region. This is not to say that within those green areas, so the 5-mile buffer is in green, doesn't mean that we necessarily have quote unquote enough charging within the green, but it definitely points out where we do not have enough charging stations. So you can see there's some spots, especially on the western side of Tarrant County, that are lacking. And then there is a tool from the Joint Office of Department of Transportation, Department of Energy to help map where electric vehicle charging stations and Justice 40 communities are located, and that is one of the tools that we will be using as well. We know that there's a lot of information associated with this particular program, so we did want to highlight, sorry, the text got cut off there a little bit, but highlight we have a website with a lot of resources, and of course our staff is available, but through the resources on our website, there are tools to find where the existing charging stations are so that you can identify, or anybody can identify where the gaps are and if there's already a charging station close by. And it's very helpful also for community members if they're looking to think about purchasing an electric vehicle. It's a good educational tool to understand what is already on the ground. So for this funding initiative, our schedule, we have 2 application windows. Our first application deadline is April 22nd. We really encourage everybody to try to get proposals into us by April 22nd. If there's money remaining, we will continue taking applications through May 20th. And then again, July 31st is our deadline for implementation. And with that, I would be happy to take any questions. That's all I've got.
I would like for our facilities and/or transportation services department to look at our sub-courthouses as potential charging stations and our precinct garages as potential locations for charging stations. And let's assess the suitability of those sites and apply for this money.
Does it have to be open to the public?
It does.
Yes.
And we can't charge them for it?
That's right.
Correct.
So do we have to pay for this electricity?
Yes, this is something that we've been asked a lot, the reason for that really goes back to the administrative burden on all of us to document and track program income if there is any revenue associated with those stations. So that is, as it stands right now, our contract with our funding agency does not allow program income. To ensure that we can get everything done on time, we've not sought an amendment to that contract that would open that door, so that's what we're constrained to.
Okay,
but we hear the concern. We do have some information from some of our cities and from the airport who have had charging stations available to the public at no cost for a long time, and we can follow up with staff and share data from them on how much those electricity costs are.
So Commissioner Brooks mentioned garage. Mm-hmm. We normally lock our garages outside of business hours. So would we have to leave them open and available?
We have not specified 24-hour access in any of our documentation, so I think we would be open to restrict,
And then we have to maintain, we have to provide all the costs to maintain and operate.
So there
Do we
are.
have any idea what the costs like that might be for a typical charging station?
So there are subscriptions that you can, depending on the service provider that you would choose. Some provide operations and maintenance packages on basically a subscription basis with a monthly fee. Sometimes you may choose to do operations and maintenance in-house if you have the staff resources to do that. There is such a thing as a quote-unquote dumb charger, which is something that does not have a Wi-Fi connection and doesn't have any mechanism for collecting payment, and those typically cost less to maintain over time. So there's different things that can be considered.
If we're not collecting payment and then therefore giving the service free to the citizens, is that considered a gift? And one, is that in any way prohibited by state law?
Judge, that's a good question. I'm going to get you an answer on that in the administrator's office. Touch base about that.
Yeah, GK and I talked about that earlier, and he mentioned
We'll
that.
get you an answer to that question.
We would also like the answer to that question.
I got a question, a couple of them. Kind of the wet towel effect here. So we're gonna pay to maintain. We're gonna pay for the electricity that the user puts. In other words, that's equivalent of gasoline. So we're gonna give them free gasoline, or free fuel, we'll call it fuel. When are we going to figure out how to charge an electric vehicle? And I don't mean charge as in charging the battery, I mean charging funding for the damage to the highway. That our gasoline tax, federal and state, pays for, the electric vehicle pays zero. When are we gonna address those issues?
So, two things. I want to come back to the assessing a fee for use of the charging station first. So the restriction or our requirement as it currently stands to make the station available to the public at no cost only lasts through the first 5 years or until our federal property management requirements are fulfilled, whichever happens later. Then you would be free to assess a fee as you wish once we've fulfilled the scope of that federal money. So that's one distinction that I wanted to come back to. You're absolutely right. Electric vehicles currently don't pay into the transportation system at all. And the vast majority of electric vehicle drivers do agree that they should pay a fair share. I don't know when that will be solved. I think it's going to be soon. Last legislative session, there were at least a dozen bills introduced that would have assessed an annual fee on electric vehicles that ranged anywhere from like $50 to $250. None of those bills passed, but once you start seeing that magnitude of bills introduced, it's generally just a matter of time, right? So whether it will be this next legislative session in 2023 or if it won't happen until 2025, but I think at some point very soon, there will be something passed in the state of Texas that will assess a fee. Whether that's the correct answer or not for me to say, and whether it's the final answer, who knows?
I understand that Ford is transitioning their entire pickup truck operation to total electric vehicles.
Yes, they have made big commitments. The F-150 Lightning will be electric. GM also unveiled their all-electric Chevy Silverado. I will say, if anybody has not seen or gotten to experience electric vehicles, the North Texas Auto Show is happening this coming weekend, March 17th to 20th. And they have ride and drive. They have a test track, an indoor electric vehicle test track. So there's a lot of opportunities to get firsthand, you get to experience the vehicle, you get to sit in the car. And both of the pickup trucks will be there. From what I understand, it's the first time that both of those trucks are in the same place at the same time, the F-150 Lightning and the Chevy Silverado.
And where is this auto show?
It's in Dallas.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, there's only one. It's called North Texas.
I think Volkswagen is 100 going 100.
Yeah.
By 2030.
Well, Lori, I want to thank you and your colleagues for being here. And as GK mentioned, that I'd asked for us to discuss this item, one, not just because of this opportunity, but because there are going to be a number of opportunities due to the federal government's imperative. And as you all may recall, during our the NACO legislative policy conference we had in February, during the large urban county caucus, we had a pretty substantive discussion on the amount of federal dollars that will be coming down to address these electric vehicle and charging stations. So, you know, hopefully this is the right opportunity for us, but if not, we need to be having more of this type of discussion and moving in that direction so that we're ready to draw down those dollars. I don't want them going anywhere else, you know, more than they would have to outside of Tarrant County, because as the maps show, is that the need is here, and we need to be working to address those needs. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lori, thanks.
And I would just point out that at my precinct garage, there are about 100 parking spots outside of the fence.
Okay. And I mean, I could certainly see this being something that, for our vehicles within our garage, that would be, it would be useful. I'm a little reluctant to say we're going to provide fuel, for all intents and purposes, to one segment of the population when we're not going to be providing it to all. That's all.
Your Honor, that's all we have at this time.
This time we'll recess our open meeting to proceed to close to discuss items exempted under section 551.071, 072, 074, 076, and 087 of the Texas Government Code. No 725, right? Do we need to put that in there or not? And 0725.
Better to have it not needed.
Having returned from our closed session, there being no business to conduct at this time, we are now adjourned.